Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Charles Kazooba. I'm offering myself as a contestant for the East African Parliament, what everybody knows as the East African Legislative Assembly. Our term of office is supposed to start in 2027 to 2032. Therefore, I'm one of those aspiring to represent Uganda in the East African Parliament. Today, I'm here to unveil my manifesto. My manifesto is not so big, it has 7 points, and these points form what I've called a reform package, a new thinking that is supposed to reinvigorate the integration process of the East African community. Because we've had a challenge that much of the thinking was started by the generation of the post-colonial leaders. That thinking has not changed. The thinking that started with the Nyereres, the Milton Obote, and Jomo Kenyatta is the same thinking that was carried on by the generation of President Museveni and his peers. Nothing new has changed. You will realize that their thinking has always been a federation of the East African region. Now, me, I'm a new generation, and I have over time realized that there are certain things that can work and there are those that cannot work in the integration of Africa because of our diversity. So today I highlight my manifesto that will propel me to a stiff competition. I know mine will be very unique. I'm not going to be like others who agree with what President Museveni says about the integration process. Issue number one, I'm calling for the suspension, the immediate suspension of the East African Federation and the consolidation and deepening of economic integration. Why? I will not go so much into details today, but I will elaborate in a few details so that in future I will try to explain each point in detail. But for today, we shall just go through the outline of the manifesto. Important to note, we cannot have a political federation because, number one, our government systems are different. Number two, all our leaders in the region have refused to sign the East African Community Governance Protocol, which creates values and standards for all leaders within the region to follow. You understand that there are those who believe in pure democracy, there are those who believe in hybrid democracy, but there are those who still have the mentality of authoritarianism. Therefore, as a region, we still have a challenge, and therefore calling for political federation now is a waste of time. In fact, it's also a waste of resources. As a people of East Africa, we should focus on economic integration, deepen it, widen it, so that majority of ordinary citizens can benefit from the integration process. Ordinary people, the wananchi, want to hear of markets for their products, jobs. How does a Ugandan go to Tanzania and get a job without any disturbance? How does a Kenyan come here and sell his tomatoes without any disruption? That's what we East Africans want to hear. And that is what we should pursue, so that there is no discrimination at whatever level. Point number 2, I'm also calling upon for a change of decision making. There is what today is being pursued is the top-bottom approach. Top-bottom approach in the sense that it is the summit, the East African Community Summit, that is a forum of heads of states within the region that decides how the integration process should move. Just the other day, at the latest East African Community Summit, it was decided that each country should pay its own members of parliament representing their countries at the East African community. Such a decision has been taken by heads of state without consulting the people of East Africa. Now, such decisions affect citizens without citizens participating in those decisions. Now, my view is that we should instead change the system and it becomes bottom-top approach. That decisions, views come from the people, then move upwards for our leaders to implement, to raise consensus and implement. So that is my other view in my manifesto. My third point is that I'm calling for a law to ban official identification of tribes, of religions in one's identification. What does this mean? Every time, for instance, an individual is arrested at police, they will ask you, which tribe do you come from? What is your religion? When the Bureau of Statistics is making surveys, they will ask people, which tribe are you coming from? Which religion are you coming from? Now, even when you are applying for a job, these things are asked. And they become a problem because they create discrimination. Take, for instance, if you apply for a job, let's say at the Civil Aviation Authority, and you've been asked the tribe you come from, and the chief executives of that organization are from a particular ethnic group, don't you think it will create a bias in the recruitment process? Now, my view is, as a region, as the East African region, we do not need to identify individuals' tribes, to identify individuals' religions. Those should be private matters. Because we need to end sectarianism, we need to end tribalism in Africa. That has been the cause of major conflicts on the entire continent. So that is my third proposal for my manifesto. My fourth point is that as a region, it is time to reform the East African community. How do we reform it? I am proposing that we reduce the powers of the East African Summit and instead empower the East African Parliament, or what most of you call the East African Legislative Assembly. We also empower the East African Community Secretariat, so that we are at par. Just like you see in the country, you have a cabinet, you have a parliament, and then you also have the judiciary. They are at par, they are at the same footing. That is what we should also do for the East African community. Why? Because the East African Community Summit has become more or less authoritarian. They do not, they disregard positions of other organs. It is them who decide as a final decision-making body. And this is not representative of people. If we look at all the decisions that have been decided by the East African community, we shall realize that some of the decisions have actually been personal decisions. For instance, how did we arrive at the coalition of the willing? When Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda decided to fast-track the integration process by focusing on a number of infrastructure projects and ignoring Tanzania and Burundi some years ago. Two, how did we arrive at a decision of expanding very fast the East African community? We don't even have a value system for our community. Countries are admitted day in, day out. Today, DRC is admitted, the other day Somalia, another day South Sudan. But do they follow a certain package of norms and values for the region? Because if we don't have a value system, then the integration cannot move smoothly. So we need to restructure the power. The powers have the summit, the East African Community Summit, and the East African Parliament with the same powers. And how does the East African Parliament arrive at having the same powers as the summit? It means we also have to restructure the East African Parliament. How do we restructure it? We introduce the direct elections, that is the adult suffrage system. Let the people elect their representatives to the East African Parliament. This business of electoral colleges, where members of Yala are elected by national parliaments, that should stop, because it is being manipulated by heads of state. How? Here in Uganda, if you are not favored by the head of state, it is very, very unlikely that you can make it to Yala, because the names come from SEC, the Central Executive Committee of the ruling party, then they go to the NRM caucus, and that is the position eventually of the entire parliament. So they become literally ambassadors, not legislators. And that is why we are seeing a number of those that have gone to the East African Parliament. They end up coming back to the country to contest for national parliament, which means there is a very little interest in the regional parliament. So we have to restructure that parliament, let the people take interest in their representatives, let them vote for them directly, so that, for instance, in Uganda, each Ugandan of voting age participates in voting for these representatives. But also, the East African Parliament should be expanded. That means we should have more representatives to be able to be empowered. And I also disagree that countries should be paying their representatives in Arusha, because it creates a bias. The East African Community Summit just said that each country pays its representatives in the Arusha Parliament. But have they set, for instance, the standards of payment? What if, for instance, Rwanda says they will pay their representatives 10 million? Uganda says they will pay theirs 20 million. Kenya decides to pay theirs 50 million. Tanzania decides to pay theirs 60 million. Now, this difference in the payment could cause a tension within the East African Parliament, because we cannot be members of the same team, members of the same parliament, but earning differently. It also means that the one who pays better will have his voice heard better in the East African Parliament. So if the Kenyans are paid better, the Kenyans are likely to be more assertive than those from Burundi who are likely to be earning peanuts. So this resolution of the East African Summit should be withdrawn. And that is why I'm also calling for the restructuring of the East African Parliament. Let it be empowered as an institution. Yes, I also propose that as a region, we create an autonomous regional military in the form of NATO. A regional military, not the one that currently exists, if it does anyway, because the framework exists, but we don't have a regional military. That is why we contradicted ourselves recently in the DRC when the East African community was invited to flush out the negative forces in Eastern Congo. We failed because we do not agree on the modalities of a regional force. So we need a regional military that is autonomous, that is paid by the East African community, that is trained and commanded at that regional level, and not this business of merely contributing troops in times of a crisis. Now, this regional military force can begin with two serious mandates. Number one, it is to protect the entire region from external aggression. Just like NATO protects the European Union member states from external aggression. But also this force, this regional military force, should be able to deal with serious issues like coups internally. If a group in a member state hijacks power and removes a constitutionally elected government, then this regional force should be able to intervene and neutralize that threat. So with those, I think for today, I'm not going to go so much into details of my manifesto. I've just outlined my views, but with time, I will be elaborating issue by issue, point by point, so that we understand each other, you understand my thinking, and then you can support me. This is a new thinking for the East African community integration process. It is time for people, for citizens, to own the integration process, which has been hijacked by a few leaders. Thank you so much.